Okay. Okay, hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is the Land Commander Gulf War 3 update for April, just making sure I got that right, April 9th, 2026, which means we are in day 41 of this war. First and foremost, I'm sorry I haven't gotten a video out sooner for those of you who depend on my hard-hitting, critical, on-it analysis. Life gets in the way of doing certain things, and I just have not had the time. The other thing I will say is, while it has been a pretty wild time this week, undoubtedly, and there's a lot we could talk about. In a lot of ways, we're exactly in the same place we always are when we get together, which is the war is still going. The war is not ending anytime soon. There are three belligerents involved in this who are not on the same page. And Iran remains in control of the strait as we speak. So, and the escalation continues, right? We didn't get Stonehenge, or rather, Trump didn't send Iran back to the Stone Age the way he had promised. I think we had kind of talked about that last time we got together. He actually had sent his more insane tweet that day, where he talked about ending civilizations and ending all the power plants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I hadn't seen it by the time I filmed it. So of course, it's Trump, so everything is always changing, deadlines moving, this and that. Anyway, the point is, he had promised Tuesday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, that, all hell was gonna break loose, blah, 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 blah. It didn't, some kind of peace agreement came along. The point is, despite everything that's happened this week, this whole shit show we just went through, we're essentially in exactly the same place, just with more escalation, and it's gotten stupider. Which I guess that was predictable too. I'm not surprised that Trump didn't level everything. I do remain surprised that we are not doing more to actually try to regain control of the strait. I mean, we flowed all these forces in there. We've done all this stuff, and Iran still controls the strait. Anyway, Trump thinks he's got a deal, right? That's Tuesday. That's Tuesday. I know this is a little rambly. I'm not as prepared for this one as I have been the other ones. I also don't have visuals, as you can see. We're doing something different tonight. We'll see if everybody likes it. But so yeah, Trump comes out, he says on Tuesday he's got a deal with the Iranians. It's super good, it's super great, everything's gonna be just phantasmo. We've agreed on all this stuff. The Pakistanis brokered it, said the same thing. It's kind of a last minute deal, like 2 hours before the deadline. But just because everybody said they had a deal doesn't mean there was really a deal. So of course, yeah, this deal kicks in, but then, immediately Israel, just continues to bomb the heck out of Lebanon, as you guys may know. If you haven't seen any of these videos, it's crazy. The what is like 180 strikes, bombs dropped on targets, I guess 180 targets hit in a matter of minutes. Just the most intense, the most number of targets hit in the shortest period of time in Israeli Air Force history. Right after this ceasefire had apparently kicked in. And of course, there's all this ambiguity. There's some versions that say that Lebanon and Israel were part of the deal. There are other versions that say it wasn't, and everybody's got a different story. And we're just back to this same clusterfuck of we have three belligerents, and none of them are on the same page. And this is just a consistent recipe for disaster, which is why I've said from the beginning, I don't see there being a resolution through negotiations anytime soon. It's going to take a long-term, sustained effort to reassert control over the strait. Israel, because they are not, they're our ally, and we're fighting this war with them, but we're basically fighting two completely different wars. And anything Trump agrees to, as I've said before, is moot if Israel decides to do something different. And Trump said that Israel was part of the deal, wasn't part of the deal, was on their own, and then Israel just blows a bunch of stuff up. They launch strikes into Iran. Iran, of course, retaliates. That night, the videos out of like Tel Aviv were crazy. I mean, the Iranians were really raining down the fire on Israel. And they also struck some other targets throughout the Gulf. I think another desalination plant was hit in Kuwait. There were targets hit, I believe, in the UAE. Admittedly, today seemed like it was a bit calmer on the kinetic side, but you know, in terms of the actual security and strategic environment, nothing has actually changed in any meaningful way, just because there's far fewer strikes going on in any direction. I mean, the Israelis are still going hard in Lebanon, don't get me wrong. They're not going quite as hard as they were the other day. And Trump didn't like that. He seems pretty pissed off that the Israelis went ahead and did this, and he was just going crazy about that in front of the White House today. And I don't know. I mean, maybe we're going to get an American president who's willing to stand up to Israel. American presidents don't tend to really do that. I mean, they're just not being a very helpful coalition partner. But that goes back to, again, you have to have unity of command and unity of effort. This needs to be worked out ahead of time. We need to get everybody on the same page. And you really just, you know, here's some lessons for empire, right? Here's some good lessons for empire. Okay, number one, if you're gonna go to war, and these are in no particular, but these are just, you're gonna go to war and you're gonna bring allies with you, like make sure you've all agreed upon what your objectives are at the strategic level. Absolutely, and probably even the operational level, and then as needed at the tactical. But for sure at the strategic, like what are your actuals? What are you trying to do? If you're gonna go blow stuff up, what the fuck are you trying to do? So let's make sure at least you've got that. And then let's also make sure you've got unity of command so that you can have unity of effort, right? Because if you have, if you have different forces, even if they're in the same nation, but particularly if they're in separate nations, all operating under different command structures, taking different orders, that's just a recipe for disaster. You know, everything from friendly, unfriendly casualties, right, because of miscommunications about where forces are operating, to just a complete breakdown of order on the battle space. You know, having one coalition partner doing one thing over here while another's doing something completely different. Oh wow, what does that sound like? What does that sound like? Does that sound like Gulf War III? Yeah, it sounds like Gulf War III. So yeah, make sure you're on the same page strategically, and make sure you get your unity of command and unity effort worked out ahead of time. And then here's another one. I think I said this before. If you're gonna go to war and you're gonna bring your buddies with you, whether it be one buddy or a lot of buddies, and you think there's gonna be a naval component, more than just, I don't know, you gotta get some cargo ships to a port or something, and then you're gonna drive through a bunch of countries to get to where the actual fight is. That's kind of how it went in Afghanistan. The tankers, the cargo ships for a long time would go to Pakistan and they'd be driven through Pakistan, through the mountains into Afghanistan. But actual naval combat, you're gonna have to have surface combatants, you're gonna need to have area defense, you're gonna have to be able to project sea power, potentially, reopen choke points, protect shipping, et cetera, et cetera. No matter how big, bad, whatever your Navy might be, it's still only one Navy with so many ships and can only be so many places at any given time. So, let's make sure they have a Navy and a Navy that can, can actually project power, right? Can actually go out there and help you, right? So again, here we are. We're in this naval kerfuffle out in the Arabian Sea, and the one buddy we've got with us, they have. I mean, in a serious way. I mean, as I've mentioned before, there are other nations that are participating in varying ways. The Australians with ISR assets, the British running certain defensive air defense and intercept missions, the Charles de Gaulle operating in a similar capacity, but nobody's really fighting with us at this point other than the Israelis, and they don't bring a Navy to the table. So make sure you do that. And another rule is, if you're gonna be a superpower, it might be a good idea just optically, visually, auditorily, in the information space, fifth generation warfare, right? We're talking all domains, information, all that stuff. It's probably a good idea if you're a superpower
or you want anybody to think you're a superpower, to not just get up there with your high-ranking officials from your leader to your Secretary of Defense on down, and just get them up there every day whining. Like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I lived through the invasion of Iraq, okay? And I remember what a kerfluffle it was between the Bush administration and you know, basically everybody in Europe except, you know, who came, the British came with us out the gate. I think the Poles came with us too, out the gate, but maybe they only came a little bit later. But the point is, most of Europe was not interested in coming along with this, right? And it was a huge rift. And it was not great, and I'm not saying the Bush team always took the high road in how they handled their public communications on this subject, but boy, it just was not this level of whining. Even when the Bush administration finally did have to go to the Europeans and beg them to help us because it was just not going well in like 04, 05, 06, and that did lead to NATO sending a whole training mission out there and other things like that. Even then, I do not remember, you know, Rumsfeld and Condi Rice and all of them whining about things like this. And every day, I gotta watch that boy, our boy, Pete Hegseth, just get up there and whine. And it's like, dude, I get it. You're bummed out. You're bummed out that none of the Euro bros want to come to your stupid party in the Gulf. Yeah, it sucks. You had a party. But like, okay, he didn't send out invitations ahead of time, so that was kind of dumb. You know, just like with real, you know, like socializing, you know, and you seem like you're probably pretty good at socializing, you know, right? If you want people to show up, you got to give them some notice. You know, let them plan. You know, put it in their calendar. Same with like fighting a war, probably more so. Because here's the thing, right? I've talked about how there's all this entropy built up in the United States and its security apparatus to do this war in Iran. It has been for a long time. That's not necessarily totally unique to the United States. There's plenty of Iran hawks buried deep in the European security establishment, 100%, in Britain, in France, in Germany. And part of the reason you know this is true, right? You don't have to actually dig very deep. If you look at most officials and people out of academia and people out of the think tanks and people out of the broader security apparatus, you know, on both sides of the Atlantic, more often than not, you'll get people who will trash talk how this war is being conducted, trash talk how it was spun up, trash talk Trump, trash talk all this stuff. But many of them will then go with, yeah, but boy, wouldn't it be great if this regime were gone? I mean, gosh, if this could just work out, I mean, that would just be amazing. So my point is, Mr. Secretary of Defense, just like when having a party, you should invite people who are interested in whatever kind of party you're hosting, right? So, you know, if you're gonna have it doesn't matter, that's not the point. The point is, there's a lot of people in Europe who probably could have gotten down with this. But you can't just like go kick it off and then, you know, holler at them a few days later when it's already the party's already raged pretty hard and be like, oh, hey guys, you wanna come like, I don't know, what, drink the fucking beer out of the fucking cups at the beer pong table? That's basically what this is like. This is what this is like. It's like Hegseth, Trump, and Netanyahu got together like, yo, we're gonna have this fucking raging party in the Arabian Gulf. Yeah, in the fucking Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea. And it's gonna be great, and we're just gonna go for it. But then it's like, yeah, the party was really, really a rager, and it's one of those parties that like kind of didn't stop the next day, and everybody's still going, but it's gotten kind of, it's a little out there, and so you're like, yo, let's get some like, maybe like, some homies to like kind of balance things out, so you holler at your homies who you didn't really invite ahead of time, and you're like, yo, you guys want to come to this party I didn't really invite you to, and it's kind of fucked up over here, and you want to just, you want to drink the beer out of the fucking beer pong cups? So yeah, I mean, you want to have an empire, that's just not how this is gonna work. You gotta plan ahead. You gotta send enough forces in. to deal with the contingencies. I mean, Bush fucked that up too. I mean, look at Iraq. I mean, that was a disaster for sure. Anyway, despite all of this, Iran still 100%. So don't whine all the time. And then, yeah, we need to stop with the Groundhog Day and it's only gotten worse. I mean, the day after this peace announcement, boy, the press conference that SecDef gave, it was just this just babbling, stupid victory lap, this Groundhog Day thing where every day we're told everything's been blown up, we've achieved everything, everything's great, but we got to blow more stuff up. And, but now we need to cut this peace deal, otherwise we got to send them back to the Stone Age, because even though we've accomplished everything, we still have to do that, and but now we've won, and blah, blah. That guy, Secretary SecDef, couldn't even be bothered to mention the dead servicemen and women in his rambling thing, or if he did, it was so buried in there. I mean, who did lead with that was General Kane, who, at least took the time to mention the Americans who died in this fiasco in the desert, and then to give some kind words and some appreciation to all of the war fighters and enablers who made this fiasco, this fever dream of yours reality, Mr. SecDef. It's terrible. It's terrible. So anyway, here we are. We have this peace agreement. It's clearly not really working out. Like I said, there's been a lot of back and forth. Today's been less chaotic, but Iran decided today was the day, even though things have been less spicy with the back and forth of the missiles and the drones and all of that, they decided today was the day they were going to announce that they have mined the Strait of Hormuz. And that's something they haven't done yet. Now, I will pause and say I haven't seen anything credible to say that they actually have done this. And I would say there's a good chance they have not gone ahead and mined the strait, because mining the strait is very problematic for everybody involved, including the Iranians. Because just like with landmines, once you put them out there, it can be very hard to get them out of there. And they will blow up your ship if it's a naval mine just as easily as a Kuwaiti ship or an American. It doesn't really matter. They're out there, and once you put them there, somebody has to go deal with them. And just like landmines, it's no easy task. So I don't think the Iranians have really done it. But I do think the Iranians have made the threat, because just the threat of it is all you need to do to keep the strait shut down. Excuse me, not shut down. Kept in a checkpoint configuration. Because what they did is they announced that they had mined the waters in the international zone, and then south of that into what are technically Omani territorial waters. So that would be pretty illegal. Not that we're really playing by international or maritime law these days in Gulf War III, but just putting that out there, it would be illegal to mine Omani waters, or it would be debatable. You could make the argument that mining Omani waters is legal because Oman is an American ally and thus not maybe a full belligerent, but a supporting belligerent in the war, and as a defensive measure, putting mines in Omani waters, you might be able to argue that that's legal. It's a stretch, but you might be able to. The point is, where they put the mines is south of Iranian territorial waters, and they now have made it very official. There are maps showing it of where the no-go zone is between Oman and Iranian waters up here. If you need a visual reference, I guess look up a map of the Strait of Hormuz. Sorry, I don't have one for you today. I should just get a printout, actually, like a nice big printout over at Kinko's and put it up next to me. That would be great. Okay, I'm getting off topic. So the mines are supposedly in this area. That's international waters and Omani waters. The Iranian waters are clear and open, and there are 2 designated sea lanes that they've created that allow one for inbound traffic going into the Persian Gulf, coming out of the Arabian Sea, and one for outbound traffic, leaving the Persian Gulf, going out into the Arabian Sea and out into the rest of the world. Of course, they all go through Iranian territorial waters, past the islands, just like they've been doing now for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they've announced it through multiple means. including regular automated broadcasts on a VHF station, radio station in the Persian Gulf, making it clear that the strait is open provided you go through these corridors that Iran has established and that you check in and get approval from the Iranian Navy. Okay, yeah, so here we are. We got a peace agreement, and the sum total of it is, I guess the only real difference now, it's not the same, it's spicier. The United States isn't seeming to really bomb things at the moment. We seem to be holding back like we said we would, though Trump has made it clear he's ready to go if he has to. So we're not bombing, and the other thing is Iran is obviously now exerting even more control over the strait and giving the perception of it. And of course, this is all a perception game, right? That's the whole thing. Even just saying we laid mines, that's a perception thing. We changed, the Iranians gave the perception, so now nobody's gonna move. And, there are some ships moving, but they're going through Iranian territorial waters. There are likely still payoffs going on, but even if there aren't, that doesn't really matter. What matters is the United States of America, which has been the guarantor of free, open navigation and use of the world's oceans and seas since the end of World War II, has now lost complete control over, and thus the rules of the system have lost complete control over one of the most important, stretches of water in the whole world. And despite all this time and effort, we're no closer to getting it back. And I will say, I think part of why there was a push to get some kind of agreement was everybody does need time to rearm and regroup. Everybody does. The Israelis have been going hard for quite a while. Their airframes need maintenance. Their crews need rest. And recovery, they need time to, and same with U.S. assets and personnel, same with the Iranians. Everybody needs time to rearm and regroup, and that's true in any war. And actually, really protracted conflicts often develop fighting seasons, and they're usually coincide with the change of the actual seasons of the weather. But you'll get conflicts that'll go on year after year, and you'll have fighting seasons, and then you'll have seasons where there's very little fighting, and that's when all the combatants run around and shore up their holdings and get ready for the next year's fighting. This was in Afghanistan. This happened a lot in Afghanistan, and both U.S. and NATO forces operating there, and as well as insurgent and Taliban forces and militia forces. Everybody there sort of played by this seasonal warfare, and the winter months would be when the war would really kind of come to a pause, and everybody would use that time to get ready for the next round of fighting. And so, yeah, a 2-week pause, especially for the United States, is pretty great. It gives you a lot of time to cycle personnel in and out. It gives you time to bring in fresh equipment, rotate out equipment that needs maintenance, bring in fresh munitions, move personnel around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's true for the Israelis, that's true for the Iranians. And us holding back still suggests that may be part of what drove all this. But the point still is the Iranians still control the strait, and we're no closer to getting it back. And we do need to get kinetic if we're going to get it back. We do need to get into the strait and into the Gulf and actually start projecting power, projecting sea control, projecting air control. Part of the problem we also face in all of this is, in was it 87, I believe, we kind of we had a similar kind of issue in the Gulf, in that the Iranians were threatening shipping through the strait, and that resulted in the tanker wars. And just to sum it up really quickly, what wound up happening is Kuwaiti vessels and others were reflagged as American ships. Thus, they came under U.S. protection, and Reagan sent in the U.S. Navy and a surface action group worked to protect American-flagged vessels and make strikes against Iran to keep the strait open. And it worked. I mean, you should read about it. Maybe I'll do a video about it. It was an interesting, it's an interesting little chapter in the long chapter of this ongoing back and forth with Iran that we've been doing, since the Shah fell. But one of the reasons we were able to do that was we had a much bigger Navy. We had a 600 ship Navy, and today we have a battle force of like 293, I think. And of course, that means only a third of your fleet is ever really available at any time. Sometimes you can surge some of the second third, but in general, if you've got about 300 ships, it means you got about 100 ships to play with. And for a nation like the United States with global commitments and responsibilities and headaches and all of that, 100 ships, and that includes a lot. That includes the ballistic missile subs, that includes fast attack subs, that includes aircraft carriers, that includes Arleigh Burke destroyers. That's the battle force. And the battle force doesn't really have, smaller ships like frigates that, are smaller, slightly less capable, less expensive to build, smaller crews, but are precisely designed to do these kinds of things, like operate, in escort capacities, moving tankers or cargo vessels through hostile territory, providing air defense for convoys, things like that, anti-submarine operations. Part of the reason we don't want to make a push into the strait is that, losing a $2.5 billion Arleigh Burke destroyer is a big loss. Now, I'm not going to say if you had a frigate that cost, say, $900 million, that wouldn't be a big loss, but it's a very different loss than a Arleigh Burke or something. And we used to have a lot of frigates, and they were great, and we got rid of them, and we never replaced them, and we've tried to replace them, and that's been just an ongoing disaster, which I definitely am going to do a video about. U.S. shipbuilding in general, actually. But that's part of the issue here, is that we've neglected building enough vessels. Because, okay, look, here's a way to think about it. Naval policy at the end of the day is a build policy, meaning everything you do requires you to build. It's very, you have to build these big ships. You have to build ships to do everything, and ships take time to build. They're complicated machines. They're resource intensive. They're human capital intensive. And there's only so many places you can build ships, right? You can't build an Arleigh Burke destroyer, outside of Socorro, New Mexico. You have to build it in places like, Groton, Connecticut, Newport News, Virginia. All branches of the military, land forces, air forces, space force, et cetera, all of them do require building things and require capital outlays and lead times and all this stuff. Ships have a particularly long lead time. They are particularly intensive in the materials they need. They're complicated. They need a lot of people, and you just can't build them everywhere. So naval policy is a build policy, because the Navy you're going to fight with today was probably planned and started being built 5-10 years ago. So we've neglected this for a long time, and now we're seeing the effects of it. We're seeing the Gerald R. Ford having to stay out on station, coming up in almost a whole year, right? We're seeing all these other ships having to stay out there longer and longer and longer, and we're seeing us having to pull forces from all these other places and reduce our presence in all these other places, which only serves to make allies nervous, make adversaries or troublemakers more emboldened, add just more chaos, confusion, or potential for it into the global arena, into the global sea lines of communication, and further damage U.S. credibility and really continue to erode the foundations of the rules-based order and free open navigations of the seas. That's not the only reason this isn't going well in the Gulf. I'm not saying that, but it is a big part of it. So, yeah, here we are. April 9th, day 41 of combat. Iran controls the strait. They're making that more codified. They're making that more solidified. We seem no closer to getting control back. Israel continues to operate on its own agenda and independently of the United States, and the United States is doing the same to Israel, right? Nobody's really talking to each other, working together in this alliance, and you can just see what a clusterfuck that's led to. Yeah, this war isn't going to end anytime soon, and it is going to have to get more kinetic. I mean, there is a reason the United States has not pulled all of its forces, begun bringing forces back, as far as I know. So any minute, any day now, you're going to see it spinning back up in terms of U.S. involvement, and don't expect gas prices to come down anytime soon. Don't expect the supply chain to start to loosen up. It's only going to get spicier from here. Now, before I finish up today, I do, as you can see, I got a NATO flag going there. And the reason I've got it there is a couple of reasons. Number one is, what better way to let everybody know that I'm a globalist pimp than by having my NATO flag up there. Number two is to show that I do support NATO. I've supported NATO a long time. I will probably continue to support NATO till either I'm dead or NATO's not a thing. And I bring it up because, of course, NATO's a bunch of the whining from SecDef, Hegseth, and Trump and co. has been directed at NATO and our NATO allies, and all this whining about how they didn't come help us and blah, 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 blah. And there seems to be a lot of disdain within this administration and in Trump's voting base for NATO. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of talk about NATO, what it is and why it matters, why it's important, why we should care. And so NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was created in 1947. It's grown to encompass 37 nations since then. It's the longest, most successful defensive alliance alliance in history. And it was formed in the aftermath of World War II, at the onset of the Cold War, and I'm sure most people know that the principal reason it was formed was to provide common defense against a possible Soviet push from the East into the West to try to take some or all of Western Europe. And this alliance crossed the Atlantic and included the United States and Canada. And at its core is Article 5, the idea that an attack on one nation is considered an attack on all nations. The one time that actually has ever been put into use was on September 11th, 2001. And so, Trump, who at least used to be a New Yorker and was definitely a New Yorker when 9/11 happened, wants to talk about, NATO wasn't there for us when we needed them and all that stuff. Well, guess what? NATO was there for us at 9/11. The only time Article 5 has been enacted was 9/11. NATO came with us. They came to Afghanistan. Everybody came. Now, I'm not saying everybody participated in equal ways or in equal size or fought equal kinds of battles. There were some NATO nations and broader coalition nations that had more constrictive rules of engagement and were willing to do certain kinds of less kinetic, less war fighting kind of work, right? And there were other nations that were equally as committed to getting into the fight as American forces were. And a great example is Estonia. Estonia, when 9/11 happened and we went in with NATO, wasn't even part of NATO yet. And Estonia, because they wanted to be part of the team, decided they were going to show that they were team players. And they sent a contingent of forces to Afghanistan that was there for a very long time, rotating out, of course, fresh forces on a rotational basis. But they went there, and they went there with some of the most open and accommodating rules of engagement. They basically showed up and said, Uncle Sam, tell me where to go, what you need me to do, and we will do it. And they did, and they lost people. And the Prime Minister of Estonia, when asked why are we sending our sons and daughters there to Afghanistan to fight for the Americans? And he said, because someday a farmer in Kansas might be asking, why is his son or daughter going to Estonia to fight for us? They weren't even part of the team yet, and they went. Everybody went. So they were there when we needed us. We didn't activate Article 5. That's not how NATO works. And if you wanted them to come along, like I said before, you got to invite them to the party ahead of time. You got to let them have time to get ready. You got to get buy-in. So at its core, NATO is a defensive alliance centered around Article 5. And that remains true to this day. And coming out of that, of course, becomes, is all this integration between all these nations. All of this integration in terms of standardization of equipment. And it's not perfect by any means, but considering there are 37 nations that pretty cohesively can work together, can fight together, can do logistics together. And again, it's not perfect, but it's always being practiced, can have integrated commands. Back to unity of command. NATO is a unified command structure, right? If a war were to break out and NATO went in, there is a structure of who's in charge and how that will disseminate out to all these nations. And that's super important. But what underpins all of that, and this is what really is why NATO is so important. What underpins all of that is every one of these nations, all 37 nations, have an ambassador to NATO. And they're all in one building in Brussels, where they can talk about things, they can discuss things, they can fight about things, they can work out things, but they have a mechanism by which they can all get together, individually, the full group, whatever, anytime they need to, right? If there's a crisis, if something's going on, you don't have to go find everybody. They're all just in this building. And then if it needs to get escalated to the member nation capitals and the prime ministers and things like that, it can be very easily. And these systems have been built and were built back in 1947 and been iterated on and improved and improved and improved and improved. And it's imperfect, of course, it's not a perfect system. But when you consider that it is very hard to facilitate discourse among even friends, even allies, having a system that builds that in, fosters it, makes it routine, is incredibly important. It's incredibly important. Before World War II and NATO, right? Let's go back in time a little bit. People might not really remember this, but Europe was a very violent place. I mean, the Europeans were constantly going at it with each other all the time, and that goes back a long way. That is not new. And Russia was getting in on it too. The whole thing. Russia all the way out to the Atlantic. Super violent, constantly shifting borders, constantly different, empires coming and going and jockeying for power. And since then, there has been, obviously the Russo-Ukrainian War is a big exception to that, and the conflicts in the Balkans, of course. But when you compare the level of internal European conflict to today, and since the founding of NATO, to the past, it's almost no comparison. And why is that? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we built a system where all 37 nations have somebody who can get together and we can talk about stuff and we can work things out and we can disagree. That's the thing. It doesn't mean we're all going to get along every day and see eye to eye on things. We're going to disagree. And there are some very valid critiques that can and should be made of a good number of the European members of NATO. Canada too, frankly. I'm not saying... And the Europeans and everybody else has some very valid, even before Trump, complaints and concerns about us. That's okay. That's okay. That's fine. Let's go yell about it out at NATO headquarters. The other thing is with NATO, and there's a saying. It's what is NATO's function? Why does NATO exist? It's to keep the Russians out, the Germans down, and the Americans in. The Russian part, right? Cold War, post-World War II, keep the Germans down, right? Keep the Americans in, right? The big military to keep the Russians out, and especially early keep the Germans down, but also to help keep the Europeans from going at each other, right? To help keep, you know, at this point now 37 nations who have their own people, their own identities, their own nations, their own national interests, all of those things, keeping them from going at each other's throats, keeping it within the bounds of some level of civility. Meaning, yeah, maybe we're yelling at each other at a conference table, or, you know, on X, but, you know, we're not sending tanks across borders. And, you know, the benefits that we and the Europeans and the whole world derive from that system of having the big military giant there to sort of help impose some civility on the Europeans, and then build this system where we all have a place to naturally get together and routinely get together and talk and get used to that. I mean, you can make a very correct argument and say that the whole pan-European project that is most embodied by the European Union and the adoption of the euro, there's a good chance that couldn't have ever happened had NATO not existed, because that imposition of us keeping the Europeans from being able to fight each other and then building a system where we all got to get together and have, you know, high-level empowered government officials from all these nations in one place, able to talk about, discuss, and hopefully resolve things. I mean, yeah, NATO's super important. It isn't just about, you know, us and the Europeans figuring out how to, you know, blow stuff up downrange. And yeah, that is super important, 100%. You know, hard power underpins soft power. Hard power creates soft power all of its own. Here's a way to think about it, right? When you get another nation to trust you with their security, to trust each other with each other's security, you know, we're getting into some real core, like, primal instincts in humans, right? We want to be safe and protected. We want to be protected from harm. And when you're willing to share that security and rely on somebody else in any way for that, there's a level of trust there that you have just bought into that can underpin a whole bunch of other stuff. So yeah, NATO's important. NATO came with us to 9/11, so shut the fuck up, Secretary Hegseth. All right, I got one last thing for you guys. And here it is. I got a proposal for peace. I think it's a winner. We're gonna take Brigadier General, and I cannot pronounce his name, but the Brigadier General out of Iran who's the spokesman. If you guys know this guy, you guys gotta look him up. He's a boss. That guy versus Pete Hegseth in a cage fight, televised for the whole world to watch. Whoever wins gets the straight. I think this is it. Let's go. I'm in. Come on, Hegseth, are you in? I bet that guy in Iran is in. He looks like he's in. And you know what? You know what I really like about that guy? Is even though every day apparently everything in his country is getting blown to fucking hell by the Americans and the Israelis, that guy is cool, calm, collected, and so intense. And that's another lesson for Empire 2, you know, kind of dovetail with the whining. You gotta be intimidating. That guy in Iran, he's intimidating. Our team, not so intimidating. Which is also to say Iran is continuing to just crush, dominate the meme wars. Okay, well, everybody, I think that's about it for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed this. I have very much so. I hope it wasn't too rambly. I hope we like this different way of doing things. I don't know that I'll do this all the time, but it's kind of fun to just sit here with the door open, just rambling. I'll try to get another video out soon, but, you know, big takeaway, Iran still got the Strait under its control. The war's still raging. Israel's still going hard in Lebanon, the Northwest Salient. They want that buffer zone, and that's just that. And we're no closer to this being over than we were when we last talked, than we were on Tuesday when the peace agreement came on. So yeah, more escalation, more spiciness, and at some point, it's going to get more kinetic in terms of trying to regain control in the strait, and we're going to see more and more outside powers get drug into this. All right, it's been the Land Commander Gulf War 3 update for April 9th, 2026. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, reach for the lasers and embrace the lights. And yeah, I will see you next time.
Oh my god, we are so fucked, dude. Look at this boss. Okay, this is the head of the Shia militias that are going nuts right now and have for a long time in Iraq, dude. He's in Tehran, meeting straight up with Iranian leadership. Yeah, this guy. Oh, dude. Oh man, dude. He's so gone.